Welcome to today's webinar, The Power of Knowing, Risks and Resources When Caring for Veterans. This free webinar is part of a series called The Power of Knowing, created by AuthoriCare Collective, which empowers people to be active participants in their care journey, enabling them to live on their own terms through personalized support for mind, body, and spirit. AuthoriCare was formerly known as Hospice and Palliative Care Center of Alamance-Caswell and Hospice and Palliative Care of Greensboro. Veterans have made tremendous sacrifices on our behalf. At AuthoriCare Collective, we believe it's never too late to thank a veteran for their service. We participate in the National We Honor Veterans program, which includes raising awareness for the needs of veterans in our community. This commitment has inspired today's program, presented in partnership with the Veterans Administration. To get us started, please welcome our moderator, Risa Hanau. Risa serves as clinical and community educator at AuthoriCare Collective and is also a member of the Cone Health Ethics Committee. She is a licensed clinical social worker. Risa, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome to our webinar. I am so excited about this important topic. It's my pleasure to introduce our panel. Joining us today, first we have Carmen Haskin. She is a licensed clinical social worker. She started as a volunteer with the Special Olympics when she was 16 and continued to volunteer with them for many years. Currently, she is employed at the Salisbury VA Medical Center as a clinical social worker with the suicide prevention team. Helping people suffering from trauma is a passion of Carmen's. Welcome. Next, joining us is Tiffany Hall, also a licensed clinical social worker. She is the co-chair of the North Carolina chapter of American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Tiffany is employed at the Salisbury VA Medical Center and is a clinical social worker with the suicide prevention team. Tiffany herself has experienced suicide loss, and she hopes that her efforts and her work can bring an end to suicide and reduce the stigma around mental health. And Diane Stinson. Diane is also a licensed clinical social worker. She is licensed in North Carolina and also New York. She works at the Kernersville Healthcare Clinic as a member of the Salisbury Suicide Prevention Team. And having come from Philadelphia myself, Diane shared that she loves our climate here in North Carolina. So thank you to our panelists. We are going to have a wonderful conversation. We also want to learn a little bit about those who are participating with us. And so we have a poll. It is 3 polling questions. You'll see it coming up on your Zoom screen. You can respond anonymously to these 3 yes and no questions. Are you a veteran? Do you have a family member or members who are a veteran? And do you provide care to a veteran? If everybody could just take a moment to answer each of those 3 questions, that gives us a sense of who is joining us as we begin our conversation. So we will just take another moment. We want to give everyone on Zoom the opportunity to respond to the poll. This is our best way, since we can't raise hands, doing it in this virtual environment. And we'll go ahead and take a look at our results. We have a number of people who are identifying that provide care to a veteran, and we know that being a caregiver certainly is very much a part of work and important for each of us to do. We have a large number of people. 91% of our participants have a family member who's a veteran, and we certainly are pleased that you are joining us. Thank you so much for participating in in the poll and in our conversation that we are going to have today. We want to invite everyone to ask a question during our webinar. You'll see on your Zoom screen that there is a Q&A box. At any time, you can enter a question, and we will do our best to answer as many of those as possible during our time together. And to get our conversation started this afternoon, Tiffany, we have acknowledged that there is stigma around mental health. And we also know that it is so important to address. So if you can talk to us, why does stigma exist around mental health issues? And how do we begin conversation around mental health, including concerns for suicide?
Sure. Stigma comes from a lack of understanding. It comes from fear. It comes from, misleading information, inaccurate information. And mental health is not something that through the years we've talked about. It's not, it's not something that's been in the forefront of conversations. You may hear someone talk about, yep, my family has a history of diabetes, or we have a history of stroke, and we're, be concerned about that. Make sure you do what you need to do so that you can be healthy in those areas. But we don't hear people talk about, my family has a history of depression, and we need to make sure that we stay, on top of that or be mentally well. We're doing better now. We're asking those questions when you go to primary care clinics and things of that nature, but we have a long way to go to overcome the stigma that's placed on mental health. And then when we talk about the stigma with veterans, these are our soldiers. These are the people that went out to protect us. And people look at having mental health issues as being weak. And it's not being weak. We all have mental health. Every last one of us. Our mental health and our physical health make up our entire health. I mean, they're both together. And when we look at it that way, we can start to change the narrative. We can change the conversation. We can make it an open place for people to talk about it, to express how they're doing. And we can ask someone, are you okay? How are you really feeling? And be able to listen and receive the information that they're trying to express. That's the way we start to destigmatize that. And also recognizing that suicide touches each and every one of us. 1 in 4 adults will have a mental illness at some point in their life. And when we recognize that and start looking at it on the same lens that we look at other health concerns, stroke, heart disease, cancer, we began to reduce the stigma and open the door for the conversation about mental health and about suicide prevention. Events like this today help do that.
Thank you. The term normalizing, right? It is a normal part of life for, as you said, so many people. And Diane, we saw on our poll that we have over 90% of our participants have a veteran as a friend or family member. And we've acknowledged that there is stigma, and we are getting better at identifying, addressing mental health issues. So can you talk to us about some warning signs? What are some things that I want to be mindful, keep my eye out for when it comes to somebody potentially being in a mental health crisis, or even potentially having risk of being suicidal?
Oh, absolutely. And as Tiffany was saying before, we look at other illnesses. We know some of the warning signs, say for like a heart attack or stroke. You go into a hospital, there'll be big signs out about acronyms on what to look for stroke. So certainly there are things what to look for suicide and for mental health crisis. And one of the big ones is hopelessness. If somebody starts expressing that they're feeling hopeless, that things are not going to ever improve, things aren't going to get better, there's no way out. That is really one of the number one things that, people can express that is a huge sign that they could be having some suicidal thoughts. And then, of course, looking at their mental health, how they've been acting, what they're saying and doing, things like increased anxiety. Are they agitated? Are they sleeping? Sleeping is a major impact on mental health. Okay, you're either sleeping too little or sleeping too much. I mean, many of the people that I speak with are only getting a couple hours of sleep, and they're having major mental health issues. Mood swings, that's another major one too. And with mood swings, again, like some of these other ones, you can look at behaviors. Is there increased rage and anger? Are they going out and spending money that they normally wouldn't do on certain things? Are they engaging in risky activities without thinking? That could be, somebody who's maybe speeding, right? Maybe they're out online dating with people that they don't normally do or things like that. Increased alcohol or drug use. Withdrawing from family or friends. I mean, these are all behavioral signs that we can see in others, especially these are our family and loved ones. We know what's normal for them and what's not. And so when these sorts of things start happening, we want to reach out and get some help for them. But there are certain signs to know if you really want to look for if the person is actually in a crisis. So if they start talking about wanting to kill themselves, not wanting to live, wanting to hurt themselves, if they start looking for ways to die. I mean, we're having this streamed online, in many ways because of COVID. This is like kind of the new thing. But with that, the internet, people looking online, there are ways they can find how they can actually end their lives, what's more lethal, things like that. So if you find that one of your loved ones is doing those kinds of behaviors, you immediately want to get help for them. Okay, if they start talking about death, they start talking about dying and suicide, again, you want to get some help for them. If they start engaging in self-destructive behaviors, or again, they start engaging in those risk-taking behaviors, especially when there are drugs or alcohol involved, and even weapons. You heard before, I'm from the North. Okay, we didn't all have guns like people do down here in North Carolina. And it's a major cultural change for me. And I've been here over 5 years now, a little bit longer. Still not quite used to it. Right. But this is normal for other people, living down here, that they've got their guns. So if you've got somebody at home who's having any kind of suicidal thoughts and their guns in the house, you definitely want to secure those weapons. You really want to look at that. But if they start pulling them out, if they're playing around with them or something, I mean, you immediately want to stop and get some help. And so that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today is where you can get that help. But if when in doubt, the Veterans Crisis Line is available for veterans, for family, for friends, for caregivers. Anybody can call that number. It's the same as the suicide hotline number, but you press 1 for veteran. And we'll show you that number. It's 1-800-273-8255 and press 1. And it's worth repeating over, as you're going to hear again, 24/7. It's always available. You can call for somebody in another state if you're worried, and they will then reach out and follow up, because you want them to be evaluated. You want your loved one to be taken care of and make sure they're safe. So you don't want to just kind of push aside these thoughts or comments or concern, because we just don't know. We just don't know. And we want to make sure that we're helping that person. And we feel that suicide prevention is everybody's business. Everybody should get involved, want to reach out and talk to somebody, help somebody. That crisis line number also has a chat and text available as well. And so for a lot of younger people who are more open to, texting or chatting, you can get some help that way too.
Thank you. And I will mention that everyone who was registered for the webinar today will be getting a follow-up email tomorrow, and all of the resources that Diane and all of our panelists mentioned, we will be including those, so you will have those at hand in addition to a recording of today's webinar. And again, if anybody has questions during our time, please type them into the question and answer area. And I want to turn Carmen. Diane made mention of the crisis line people can call. When I had the opportunity introduce each one of you. We made mention of the suicide prevention team. Tell us a little bit about what is that team? What do you do? What happens if I pick up the phone and I call that crisis line as a family member? What will you offer and what will occur?
Yeah. So when you call the crisis line, of course, you're going to be given the opportunity to state what your concern is, your reason for calling. That responder is calling the crisis line is not initially immediately going to get you directly to the suicide prevention team, but that caller is going to address the concerns, make sure that you, if you are calling as a caregiver or a family member, that you're safe, that the veteran is safe, and they are going to ask for identifying information so that they can know, who they're talking to, who the veteran is. And then from there, they will do send us the information. And we follow up with calls to the crisis line within 24 business hours. So like if you call on Monday, then we have, we'll return that call by Tuesday. And of course, if you call like on a Friday, then that call is returned by Monday. So it's the next business day. And we are assessing for safety as well, just to make sure that everyone is safe. If there is a situation where someone is not safe, they're in immediate danger, then we will let you know that we're sending someone out to, and that would be, emergency services or the police, depending on the situation. And get you to the care if it's immediately, get you to the hospital if that's what needs to happen. And the other thing, if it's not where you need to go to the hospital, then we assist with getting you connected to the care that you need, because the VA has lots of different services to handle or address different stressors that may be necessary. That includes like homelessness program, mental health services. Some people have medical issues that they need to be addressed, and we get them linked to, if they're not registered with the VA, we help you walk you through that process to let you know how to get registered with the VA and what's the closest VA to you. So it's really just addressing those individual needs when the person calls in.
Thank you. I always think it's important that people know what to expect or what to anticipate. And Tiffany, I'm thinking about, we know that veterans deserve all of the care that we can possibly provide along with their family members. I wonder if you could speak to us about some of the unique challenges that veterans face, why it is that mental health issues may be more in the forefront for our veteran population, just so we have a good understanding of that.
Yeah, with a lot of our veterans, they've just held things in for so long that letting go of it is scary. Talking about it to people that they feel may not understand them, can't relate to what they went through or what they experienced. And also even having a sense of regret over things that they may have done or witnessed while in combat. A lot of people may be afraid to speak about it, because when we speak on something, that makes it real. If we don't talk about it, then we can act like it didn't happen. But what we know is that when we don't talk about it, when we hold it in, that can make things 10 times worse for us and for those that are attempting to care for us. We hear a lot from children of veterans, spouses, wives, husbands, partners of veterans that, they just don't know what to do. The veteran won't talk to them, or They can't get the veteran to come in. They'll come in for their medical appointments, but they won't come down to mental health. And it's mostly because the veteran may feel like they're not ready to address those issues. And then also some veterans feel like I made it back home, whereas a buddy did not. What do I have to complain over? And what we know from working with our veterans in mental health, we just have to let them know that this is a safe place to talk about whatever's happening, whatever has happened. It's a safe place for you to let that go and actually learn how to cope with the things that you're going through. We want everyone to be mentally well, whatever that means for you. It doesn't mean that life is going to be sunshine and roses, but it means that you know how to deal with what's happening or what has happened. And then also to let you know that you're not alone. You're not alone in this, that other people are facing similar challenges as you are. And we want to help you get through this. We want to help your support outside of VA get through this and get you to a better place.
Thank you. I can imagine that the needs, Diane. I'm wondering if you can talk to us. The veteran clearly may be in need of mental health services. We might call that crisis line. As a family member, as a friend, I wonder if you could speak about the unique needs or how you all reach out and assist the family members, because I can imagine it must be hard to start a conversation if we're concerned about a loved one who is a veteran. We might be unsure of where to turn. And can you talk to us about how you assist the family members?
Well, sure. So as Carmen mentioned before, many times we get crisis line calls from family members, and that's exactly the majority of this audience is the family and caregivers. So we're going to make an outreach call after we get those initial consults, and we can speak to the family members and find out what their concerns are. And many times, in addition to trying to link the veteran themselves to care, we try to connect them at the VA. If they're not already connected with care, as was mentioned, we'll try to get them registered. We'll try to get them some appointments. One thing to know, the VA does offer what we call same-day access of care. So you can come in for either a mental health or medical and be seen by a provider that same day. So we help to actually coordinate those things to happen. And in the day of COVID, most of this is done video, so you don't have to physically come in. But I've given a lot of resources to family members themselves. The VA has a caregiver support program, and there's a caregiver support line. It's not 24/7 like the crisis line is, but it does run evenings and weekends. So it does give some extended hours, especially for those folks who, maybe they've got another job or they're just busy caregiving. So there's a support there. And there's a team of social workers that provides like groups and resources for the caregivers. It used to be, and I'm not sure again with COVID right now, but they would have groups right on site, and then they would have the veterans go to another spot so they could be watched for those people who couldn't be left home alone. Because, for people who are caregiving for somebody, you might not be able to just leave the veteran to go out and attend some group somewhere for yourself. You're putting this person really in front of your needs, and you do need the help and support for that. NAMNI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, also has great resources for families and caregivers right here in North Carolina. So I've given folks that resource as well too, that they can again get the support that they need, because it's difficult caring for folks. It's very difficult. So we want to make sure that we provide the support that we can. And then of course, for people who are dealing with substance abuse issues, there are also support groups for families for that, like Al-Anon and things like that. So we can also offer that kind of support. There are some veterans that will do some individual treatment, and they'll bring like their spouse or caregiver along. So sometimes you can do some didactic treatment, and there are some groups that actually, will involve the other person. I think it was mentioned before by Tiffany that some of their experiences, they maybe they can't relate to other people or don't think they're understood, you know, especially somebody who might be dealing with some post-traumatic stress disorder. So there are some groups that may be held that you can bring the caregiver in for that, as well as with substance abuse or just working with the providers. So there is a lot of that help that's out there for families as well.
Thank you. And somebody sent me a message through the chat. Again, you can use the question and answer, but you've made mention, both Carmen, Diane, if somebody reaches out to the crisis line or another part of the VA and they are not formally registered, it sounds like, Carmen, you all help people walk through, you know, their starting point, how to actually get registered with the VA so that they are then able to make use of all of the services that are available. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. And we provide them with the information of how to register. The veteran will need their DD-214, so we can walk them through, if they don't have that already, how to request it. And I know that recently, due to COVID, the National Archives was backed up and they were only accepting urgent requests. So if it is an urgent request, we can help them navigate requesting that, making the urgent request, but they can also present to their local emergency room, like Salisbury, Fayetteville. The other one is escaping my mind at the moment, but the local VA emergency room, it's 24/7, and they can go there, and even without the DD-214, they won't be turned away from care. They will be able to be seen, and then would need to connect with a patient advocate to work on getting the DD-214. So there are different ways around that, but they can still get care.
Great. And, you know, Tiffany, it strikes me that, you know, COVID naturally has come up in our conversation. And I wonder if there are some additional concerns that you all have witnessed or become aware of, or that we should be aware of around COVID as it relates to the potential for a mental health crisis and risk of suicide, either because of isolation or some of the other experiences that veterans may have gone through over this past now more than a year.
Yeah, I think you said it right there, just the isolation and what that has brought on for people. You know, being by yourself or having limited face-to-face interaction, being mindful of that, and also the struggles that each and every one of us has endured this past year. For our veteran population, what we've heard the most is that you know, they missed coming into the VA, not just for their appointments, but that connection with other veterans, the people that they didn't have to explain what was going on in their head to, the people that just got it. They miss that. And as the world starts to slowly open back up, recognizing the fear that some of us have, that a lot of us have in being back in that face-to-face presence, even though we miss it, you know, just making sure that we're healthy and okay with what's happening. We've been closed off for so long, and that's what I hear from a lot of our veterans. You know, I've been in my house, you know, I've had nothing but my cat or my dog or the occasional visit. I want to go out, but at the same time, I'm also afraid of what could happen when I go out. So, you know, just listening is the big thing here when we're talking about mental health and suicide prevention. Listening to what the other person has to say and what their reality is, that can help us. I mean, that can help us so much, because we're not assuming that individuals are okay with, you know, going out or not wearing a mask, or wearing a mask, or just being back in public. but listening to what's what's happening and what they're expressing so that we can help them appropriately. Carmen and Diane both have stated about the services offered at the VA, and with COVID, that taught us how to do telehealth well. Not just telehealth and mental health, but in other areas through our clinics. So listening to our veterans' needs and how we can accommodate that with the services we have to offer is very, very important. We have mental health integrated in other clinics, such as primary care, or our other clinics know how to access a mental health provider if someone is showing signs of being in a mental health crisis. That's very important because people may avoid just coming to mental health altogether. Again, that stigma we talked about earlier surrounding mental health. But just listening, I can't express that enough, being able to listen to where the veteran is, where the caregiver is at this moment, so that we can adequately help them not go into a mental health crisis or come out of a mental health crisis.
Wonderful, thank you. When you're mentioning the services, somebody asked, Diane, you were talking about some warning signs, and we know certainly if somebody is behaving, perhaps they're spending a lot more than they used to. We also know that financial issues, whether we're in a crisis or not, is something that so many people face, so many veterans struggle with. Are there any particular financial management or programs through the VA that assist people with managing finances? Or that was a question that we received from one of the participants.
Well, there are social workers in the primary care clinics. So anybody who has any kind of question at all that could be, even related to something like this, it's a good place to start, is to reach out to the primary care social worker. And, you can just call or stop in. You don't need to have consults or appointments or things like that. There are a lot of resources in the environment in the community that can help people. NC Serves is one that comes straight up to mind that I give out to many, many callers, because a lot of times when people call the crisis line, whether they're homeless and or having a lot of financial issues, that's an agency that I would make some referrals to. So there's that. But, there are some veterans who, whether it be because they're in crisis or not, have difficulty with managing their monies, especially some people that, whether because it's mental health reasons or maybe substance abuse reasons, and perhaps they need somebody else to be managing their money for them. So the VA could put in for what's called like a fiduciary. So somebody who could be put in charge of authorizing payments for certain things. So much money, goes to the veteran, of course, but then maybe making sure things like the rent gets paid and different things like that. So again, that's a discussion. If somebody's concerned about the person that they're overspending and then they don't have money at the end of the month or whatever, there is some help that can be provided for that as well too.
Great. Carmen, we have a wonderful question about, I as a family member might see that there are mental health concerns, but yet my family member, my veteran who is my loved one is saying, no, I don't need help. I don't want to get help. How do I, as that family member, as that friend, what do I do? I want to, not go against what my loved one is saying, but yet I see the need for help. Perhaps I'm afraid. I want to be sure everyone's safe. How do we help people negotiate that?
The biggest part, of course, you do want to listen to what they're saying. Maybe they have some hesitations for different reasons. Maybe I've heard different reasons that, I don't want to talk to a stranger about, what's going on with me. And some may not even realize at all that they do have an issue. And if there's a gentle way to bring up your concerns, like I've noticed lately that you haven't been sleeping. Are you not sleeping because you're having nightmares, or like what do you think is keeping you from sleeping? Do you think that's something that we could go see a doctor about and break it down to maybe a smaller issue if possible? I've noticed that you haven't been coming around, or you haven't been answering the phone lately. How have you been feeling? And just, if you can, try to, in a gentle and non-judging way, get to the smaller issue, and then maybe they'll be willing to go see someone for that. Like they'll be willing to go see someone because they haven't been sleeping, or maybe they'll be able to go see someone because they have been feeling sad, and maybe they don't want to take medicine, but they're willing to talk to someone that doesn't prescribe medicine about different things to do. So maybe if you can talk about what is causing the hesitation, then that can encourage them, and know that they're supported. That can encourage them to maybe see someone else.
Thank you. I think it's that fine line. We don't want to betray our loved ones, but by the same token, we can see a need. And Tiffany, I'm thinking about now, particularly about safety. Safety for the veteran, but safety for the family. Diane made mention of, securing if there are weapons in the home, but are there some things that we want to be aware of in terms of guns in the home, medication, just different things that you all pay a lot of attention to through your work as a part of the suicide prevention team, and some tips or things that the loved ones, the family members, can be particularly mindful of around safety?
Yeah, lethal means safety is super important. And when we talk about lethal means safety, most things that pop up in our head is gun safety. As Diane mentioned, we're here in the South. People love their guns, and they don't want to part with them. But we also have to look at it at the, on the same token as, if you're physically ill, then we would remove your keys, because it's not safe for you to drive at that moment because you're physically ill for whatever reason, or you're on medication that makes it unsafe for you to drive. We're not saying that forever you're not going to be able to drive, but at this moment, it's a safety concern. We have to look at that, look at it the same way when we're talking about firearms in the home, when we're talking about medications, when we're talking about sharp objects. Recognizing where the veteran is at that moment and what's going to help keep the veteran and the family safe. Think about where you keep medications. For most people, if especially older adults, if they're ill and they have lots of medication, they keep them in their kitchen, on the counter. People have access to that. And we don't know who's coming in and out of our house if they are having a mental health struggle. Also with the veteran, restricting that access to medication, locking it up. It's better to be safe. It's better to be safe. Having lost individuals in my personal life to suicide, I would rather be safe than to worry about whether that person's going to be mad at me. The way I look at it, you got to be alive to be mad at me. You got to be alive not to want to talk to me. So if you're alive and you're doing those things, I'm okay with that. So I'll be okay with you being upset that I expressed to your doctor, or I reached out to mobile crisis or your therapist and advised them that we need, you're misusing your medication. I'll be okay with that, because in order for you to have that emotion, that means you're still here with us. And that's the goal, to make sure that we keep people safe and out of that suicidal crisis so that they can get the help, that they need. But in regards to, medication, firearms, sharp objects, keeping that out of the way of a veteran that may be experiencing mental health crisis. If you talk to the pharmacist or the doctor, sometimes they'll restrict the amount of pills you're getting. Instead of giving you a 30 or a 90-day supply, they might give you a 7-day supply. Lock boxes for medications, lock boxes for weapons, storing your firearm and your ammunition separately. We provide gun locks free of charge, to the community, to our veterans, to the agencies that work with veterans, because we know that it's the time that we're trying to, stop someone who's in a suicidal crisis. So if they have to stop and think about where's the key, my ammunition's over here, we're adding time. And we know that time, the suicidal crisis can decrease, and people are more likely not to make an attempt. Having the Veterans Crisis Line stickers on items, having safety information as to who to call, that can help a family member or a veteran that's in crisis.
Thank you. It's really, I hear you saying we want to reduce the impulsive nature of an act to the greatest extent that we are able. We've used the term, Diane, a mental health crisis. And can you just help us understand, when we talk about a mental health crisis, is that something that you're usually seeing a precipitating event, something happens and that might put somebody at a higher risk for a mental health crisis? Do we see at certain times of the year, are there certain patterns perhaps that we can be aware of in terms of mental health crisis, recognizing that there's individual realities for each person?
Well, that's certainly, their stressors certainly play a role in how everybody handles, what life throws at them in general. So if you're dealing with mental illness in general, whether it be that thing that happened was when you served years ago, that you were exposed to some kind of a traumatic event, sometimes those thoughts just come on. So it may not be that something is happening today, but if you've got somebody who's also dealing with financial stressors and they're homeless, they're about to be evicted, and there's relationship problems. I mean, relationship problems can be a major trigger for some of these suicidal crises, especially with some of the younger veterans from what we've seen. One of the things that our team does is we work with people on safety planning. And so coming up with a good safety plan, it can be for our high-risk veterans or people who just call the crisis line, whoever we're talking to. If it seems like they're going through a crisis, or they recently have gone through one, after making sure they're safe and all, we want to make sure they have a good safety plan. And the first part is identifying what is the trigger. What is that brought on those thoughts of suicide that got you to this point? So for some people, it could be the stressors. When we look at COVID this past year, major stressor is that we're all isolating. Isolating is not a good thing for people, for their mental health. So, there can be that. But then when you start looking at their mood, and if they're taking care of themselves, especially if they do have mental illness, there's many people who, once they're feeling okay, they don't want to take their meds anymore. And that could be the trigger that starts putting them back on a downhill slope. So, you really have to kind of look at different things. Anniversary dates, if you've had a loss in the family, somebody that has passed away, and especially if it's around a time of a holiday, that can be another trigger for some folks. And then I've also experienced, some of these veterans have difficult times, say, around July 4th, because all of the noise from the fireworks. Think about our own pets, right? How many of us out there have dogs? There's a lot of dogs that do not do well with the fireworks. So it's the same sort of thing with some of these veterans, because that can bring back, the experience. They can find themselves back re-experiencing, areas of combat that they've had before. So certainly all different things to look at. And as I mentioned before, the safety plan we do, that first step is identifying the triggers, because if you know what your triggers are for these times of past crisis, then you can start working on using some coping skills to try to distract yourself. So we help people identify different things they can do on their own to try to get themselves out of their heads when they're having these kinds of experiences. And if that doesn't work, who are the people they can call and talk to? Who are their social contacts? So we kind of work through that with veterans. And when that doesn't work, who's there for them in a crisis? Who are their professionals? Who are the people that they can call if it's the veteran crisis line? And we kind of end up with looking at making sure the environment's safe, which is what Tiffany was really just talking about, with lethal safety planning and things like that, and what are additional resources. So that's a big tool that we like to use with a lot of folks and make sure that they have with them, so they have something available for the next time around should things get back, they get triggered again.
That's wonderful. I think that also gives people a sense of control, right? I know what to do. A lot of our conversation has really centered around, certainly, Tiffany, as you said, listening, and also, I think, raising the awareness of the resources that we do have in our community. And again, we will send out an email tomorrow that is going to list many of these resources that we have spoken about. And as we begin to wind up our time together, Carmen, I'm struck by the sense that it is important for people to know about the resources. We want to get information out there, but there's also something very helpful. There's a fine line between it's important for people to know, but it's also helpful. And I wonder if you can speak to that emotional piece of maybe the relief or the comfort that comes with being connected with your group in terms of suicide prevention and other resources through the VA.
Yes, it is. I guess when we talk to people, a lot of times they're in a state of frustration or they're in a mental health crisis. They're not feeling their best. So a lot of times when I talk to veterans or their loved ones and caregivers, it's helpful for them to know, okay, what do I do next? What resources are out there for me? And knowing that there is help for certain situations, like if it is a financial issue and there is a resource for that they can, contact NC Serves if they are, and NC Serves is outside of the VA, but it is something that helps veterans in different financial situations. But just being able to be linked to different resources can provide a relief, because that there are other people that are out there that are listening and that they care and that they're willing to help.
Diane, I have been being a social worker myself. I appreciate what you said in terms of, oftentimes if we don't quite know the exact person, the right resource, we can reach out to a social worker. We can reach out, it sounds like, to many points within the VA. And then there is a process to get me where I need to go. So I don't need to know who to call. You guys know how to direct me. Am I understanding that correctly?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. So the VA, like I said before, there is a social worker in the primary care clinics. And so for any sort of question or issue that's not strictly medicine related, you can call and ask for that social worker and they will help connect you to whatever the care is. As Tiffany mentioned before, if it's related to mood or your concern, it's a great idea to talk to the primary care provider, but you can talk to that social worker too. And between the two, they can connect you with a mental health professional right there in the primary care clinic. The social workers know a lot of resources in the VA, whether they be for caregivers and home health needs and all kinds of things. So even though we may be talking more about suicidal crisis and things like that, there are a lot of resources that the VA can provide, and starting with your social workers are a great stepping stone. But for somebody who's involved with the mental health issues, some more serious mental health issues, they're connected with the mental health clinic, and there are lots of social workers there. And the nice thing about the VA is that, as I mentioned before, there's same-day access of care. So if you need to talk to somebody right away, you can talk to them, whether they be in primary care or in the mental health clinic. Social workers are involved in mental health in terms of providing all kinds of treatment, including substance abuse and things like that. There's specialty care for PTSD, so we can give resources, but we can also provide a lot of care as well. So really reaching out is a great thing to do. If you're ever concerned, just give a call. You can even reach out and ask one of us. I had done one of these trainings before, and I had a crisis line call from a caregiver who was, saying, I got your number at this last training. So we really encourage that, because we're here to help you all. And I was just thinking of another resource too. We talked earlier about the veteran who doesn't want the help. And what do we do as caregivers when we're like banging our head against the wall to get this person care? Well, there's also a support line for that too. It's called Coaching into Care. And it's another resource that we can, send to you all, so that you have another number that you can call and speak with people who can continue to work with you on how to, try to engage that person. So there's a lot of help and resources here. And if we can't help you in the VA, we're going to refer you to somebody in the community that can help you. So please just, pick up the phone. We're here to help.
Wonderful. And Diane, just on that topic, someone asked a question whether, do you have to be a family member in order to receive assistance? So if I'm a caregiver, but I am really suffering and struggling as it relates to the care I'm providing to a veteran, are some of your services available to me, or is it limited to the veteran and the family?
Well, I would say no, it's not limited to the vet, because the family could be the caregiver, or it could be somebody else who's the caregiver. They're still providing that care to the veteran. And I think the first place to start there is really the VA Caregiver Support Program. And again, there's a like a 1-800 type number. We'll get that to you. But they've expanded the services that they've provided in that program. So it used to be like after 9/11, they were providing some services for certain veterans who were, injured after that time, to the caregivers as well. So the caregivers themselves could get services like some type of insurance and therapies and things like that. And that program has just recently, I think in October, has expanded so that it's not just those post 9/11 veterans, but that it's servicing other folks as well. So there's the general caregiver support where they're supporting all caregivers, but then there are even more specialized one that's more available to give you even more care and direct counseling and treatment as well. So again, just, reaching out to somebody and looking through those resources, a lot of great stuff that we can help provide you.
Wonderful, thank you. And so Tiffany, as we come to the close of our time, you have spoken so eloquently, both professionally and personally, about your passion and the need for really shining a light on mental health issues, suicide issues. What do you want us all to know, as we leave this time together, in terms of reaching out, connecting, trying to get past that stigma, as you said, so that people are here for us to continue to be with and have as a part of our lives?
I want people, all people, not just veterans or caregivers of veterans, but all people to understand that you don't have to be in a mental health crisis to reach out for help. You don't have to wait until things get so bad that you don't know where to turn to reach out for help. I don't know how to fix my car if the check engine light comes on. I'm going to take my car, if it's drivable, to the mechanic who specializes in fixing cars to do that check engine light. We need to look at mental health the same way. If something's going on and you don't know how to help yourself, help your friend, help your loved one, then we need to go seek professional help from those that are trained to provide that. Let's not wait until everything's crumbling to reach out. That's how we began to normalize this. That's how we began to make change within our community. That's how we began to get people to come in to talk about their mental health, to talk about their struggles. And that's how we began to reduce the number of suicides that we have among our veteran population and our other vulnerable populations. By talking, having presentations like this, listening, learning our resources, and taking that step to help connect people to that assistance. I always tell folks, put the crisis line phone number and save it like you would save a contact. And if someone is expressing suicidal ideation or they're expressing a mental health concern, I know it's going to make you flustered and you're going to feel like, I don't know what to say. Don't worry about that. Just be there to listen and say, hey, let's call these folks. I'll sit here with you while you talk to them because they know the words to say or know where to connect you. That's how we begin to help. That's how we begin to normalize this. That's how we all begin to become more mentally well.
Thank you. Thank you. That was powerful and meaningful. Thank you each. Tiffany, Carmen, Diane, you have been an amazing panel, both your expertise and your information, but also the passion and the empathy that you bring to the work that you do every day. Thank you also to the participants. We will again be sending an email out tomorrow. It will have a recording of today's webinar. It will have a list of the resources that we have made mention so that you will have that to refer to. You can also respond to the email. It comes directly to me and I will get back to you just as soon as I am able, and I'll reach out to one of the panelists if I do not know the answer. I want to share a few other resources. This will be included in the email. There are a series of veteran drive-through resource fairs coming up. 2 are located in Greensboro and 1 is in High Point. You can see the dates coming up, Thursday the 20th, the 21st, and then May 26th, right here on our AuthoriCare Greensboro campus. And again, we'll include that in the email. Also want to bring your attention that there are many Veteran Connect coffee and conversations. They go on throughout the community in Burlington, in Mebane, in Yanceyville. We'll include this information. We've made mention of how being able to break through some of that isolation is important. So we want to make everyone aware of this offering as well. And as we turn to look to our next webinar, in June, we're going to be having our Power of Knowing webinar, Beyond the Casserole, how to truly support a grieving person. And we know that that can be so difficult often when somebody we care about has experienced a loss. So we invite everyone to join us, and we will be sending out registration information shortly about that. As we close, I want to share a quote from Dan Lipinski. It says, "On this day, let us remember the service of our veterans and let us renew our national promise to fulfill our sacred obligation to our veterans and to their families who have sacrificed so much so that we can be free." Thank you so much for being with us, and I hope everyone has a good rest of the day. Thank you.